Hey, good evening, good morning, good day to you. I don't know where you're at as you watch this, but we're in week 5 of our journey through the book of Acts. And I hope what you've seen is a God who is faithful to his people. When God calls us to spread the gospel, he works through us. When God brings us alongside his work, he blesses us in how he allows us to see his goodness, right? And so last week we talked about what do you do when you're persecuted and how does persecution actually, sometimes strengthen the movement of the gospel. This week we're going to sort of continue on that and we're going to look at the life of Saul, right? So here's a guy who was murdering Christians because he thought they were heretics. Well, God shows up when he is on the road to Damascus, knocks him off of his animal, blinds him and says, "Stop persecuting me." And he comes to Christ. Isn't that insane? Listen, here's why this can be encouraging to us. A lot of us have this one, right? We've been talking about our one. Maybe it's your 2 or 3, but we've been talking about our one. And a lot of us are like, man, my one will never come to Christ. But if you only knew how dark they were, if you only knew how much they hated the church, if you only knew, if you only knew, if you only knew. Here's why I hope this is an encouragement to you. Listen, Saul was not open to the gospel. He was not ready for God to do something in his life. God didn't wait for him to be ready to show up and save him, right? God showed up when God was ready to show up. Listen, you don't get to control when and where your one accepts the gospel. You don't have that kind of power. I don't have that kind of power. Nobody has that kind of power. But listen, this goes back to when we talked about the Holy Spirit at the day of Pentecost. What we see happen here is a reminder that the conversion of people is not dependent on our effort. We can be obedient and sometimes people will reject the gospel. We can be obedient and sometimes people will hear the gospel. The outcome isn't something that we can control. All we can control is our obedience. All we can do is love and share the gospel. My favorite part of this story is after he gets converted and he shows up to the guy and God's like, "Hey, I'm sending him to you." How nervous would you be if there was somebody that you knew was trying to kill you and God came to you and was like, "Hey, listen, I know this guy's been trying to kill you. He's safe now. He's going to stay in your house for a while." Are you good with that? Can you imagine the prayer in response to that vision? Like, "God, are you sure? Do you know who he is? Do you know what he's done? You want him to be at my house?" Right? Listen, we can barely tolerate the people on Facebook that disagree with us politically. Can you imagine the faith that it would take to house the guy that was killing other believers? But that's what you see happen because that's the power of the gospel, right? And so I don't know who your one is. I can't imagine how hard it could seem to believe that they would ever accept Jesus, but Saul does. So here's the good news. This is just a reminder of God's power and his love for his people. Even when Saul was murdering God's people, God loved him enough to save him. What does that say about the power and ability of God to save the people that we think are too far gone? What does it say about how little it matters if you're eloquent enough or if you're educated enough or if you're whatever enough, right? It's a reminder that it's not about you. It's not about your effort. All we can control is our obedience to God. He takes care of everything else. And when he does, oftentimes it's stronger than we can possibly imagine it would be.